Greetings from Banff National Park. Banff has a nice, powerful name to it. And it's got two F's at the end, so make sure you get that second F in there. It's Banff. It's not just Banff. Where is it? It's in Alberta. For those of you in the United States, Alberta is in Canada. And by the way, Canada is north of you. I kid, but still. I'm excited about diving into this place. Canadian Rockies, really fascinating. The geology, incredible geology, interesting history, beautiful, incredible places. What a paradise this is, Banff National Park. Let's get into it. Howdy, folks. I made it to the amazing, the world-famous Lake Louise here in Banff National Park. These mountains are incredible, majestic. Now, there are 6 different glaciers around this lake. What is a glacier? Well, it's a big piece of snow and ice that has accumulated over thousands of years. Because there's so much snow and it's so cold where it's at that it doesn't melt all the way through the summer. By the time the end of summer hits in the fall, there's still snow and ice, and then it starts snowing on top of it, and so it starts to accumulate because it never melts enough throughout the summer to go away, and so you end up having a huge piece of cool-looking snow and ice. That brings us to this question of why is this lake so dang beautiful? Why is it so turquoise? It has to do with the glaciers. One of the things that's interesting about glaciers is they do move. They slide along the surface. As they're sliding, they're actually grinding up the rock underneath into really small particles of rock called glacial flour. And that gets in the glaciers, and the glacier melts. And so now you have water that has come from the glacier that has little tiny particles of rock. This glacial flour goes down to the streams, and look at this stream. This is muddy looking, right? It's cool looking. It's all creamy looking. Yeah, that's not mud. That's from glacial flour. Okay, in the streams, it doesn't look so beautiful. It's just kind of interesting, creamy, brownish. But as you get into the lake, what happens is it's so small, so light, this flour doesn't just fall down to the base of the lake. It stays up. Okay, and so now this lake has a bunch of little tiny particles of glacial flour all around the lake, up and suspended. Okay, think about how we see color. Visible spectrum of light, what our eyes can pick up, it's made up of various wavelengths of light. Red, orange, yellow, green, blue, violet are each associated with different wavelengths of light. When that white light hits something, that material can absorb, reflect, or scatter those wavelengths. Okay, so with water, all that light, white light combining all the colors goes into the water, and water actually absorbs reds, oranges, and yellows. Now we have greens, blues, and violets. Typically water scatters blue all over the place, the best, and that comes back to our eye. So these blue wavelengths get scattered all through the lake, get reflected back into our eyes, and we see that the lake is blue because all these blue wavelengths have made their way back to our eyes. Well, if you have glacial flour, that actually affects the color because it scatters greens as well. So you don't just see blues scattered and then make their way back to your eyes, but greens do too. So it's a combination of greens and blues. Violets, they don't get scattered as much, so you don't see the violets very much. Mostly greens and blues. That combination creates this awesome, beautiful turquoise color. Love it. Now, an interesting thing about Lake Louise is it actually changes color throughout the year. How cool is that? It depends on how much glacial flour is in the water. That glacial flour does make its way down to the bottom of the lake, and so there's less flour, and so it's going to become more blue. In winter, it freezes over, but then as spring hits, it starts to break up. There's not a whole lot of glacial flour in the lake at that point because the glaciers haven't been melting. But then as we get toward the warmer months, glacial flour starts entering the lake, and it becomes more greenish, and you see it. It's awesome. How neat is that? Lake Louise, what a magical place. This was the first national park in Canada, but it wasn't initially called Banff National Park. It was actually something that started because of a hot spring that was discovered. They were building the Canadian Pacific Railway across from British Columbia all the way across Canada. And around 1883, a few guys that are working on that got laid off. So they're looking for a new way to make money. And they're like, hey, maybe we can find some natural resource around here. And they found this little hole in the ground. And they're like, hey, there might be something in there like gold or silver or something. Let's go check out that hole. One of the three guys was heading down there. He started to experience some steam and stuff. And he's like, you know, something is interesting about this place. Next thing you know, it opens up to this awesome cave. This beautiful cave with some hot springs. Wow, this is special. Okay, it's not the natural resources that we were hoping for. And they didn't find any gold or whatever, but they did find something they knew they could make money on. What they did then is they said, this is our area. We're going to start charging people to come up here and visit this beautiful cave with amazing hot springs. They built this fancy little hotel, real high-class hotel. And they said, hey, guys, you got to come up here and check out these awesome springs, this beautiful cave. What an amazing place, and we're going to charge you a little bit, but it's worth it. Well, they didn't actually own the land at that point because with the Canadian government, they couldn't actually buy the land like that. And so it wasn't legally theirs. And so 5 other guys showed up and said, hey, it's not legally yours. We're going to start charging people as well. And, of course, there was a bit of a dispute there. And the Canadian government got involved and said, okay, you can't actually buy this legally, but what we're going to do is we're going to take this over. We realize this is a special area. We're going to preserve this area, but for those 3 guys that initially found it, we're going to pay you. So those 3 guys did make some money from the government. They said, here's some cash. Now get on. We'll take it over from here. And that's how the first piece of land was preserved that became basically a national park at that point, back in 1885. So it was discovered. The springs were discovered in 1883. Park's now thing at 1885. And then with a little bit of time, the Canadian government was like, hey, wait a second, this whole area is special. Look at all these other cool things. And so they ended up expanding the zone, and then they eventually changed the name to Rocky Mountain Park. And then this guy shows up from Europe. He starts doing a lot of things to really build this place up, bring in tourism. He decided to change the name to Banff because back in Scotland, there's an area where he was from. There's some people say that it was named after a train station, actually. Others say, well, there was a town there called Banff. So he said, I want to call this just like the place I was from back in Scotland. So there you go. All right, let's talk about geology. Geology is awesome, especially around here. Now, it's one thing to look at rocks and mountains and be like, oh, that's interesting. That looks kind of cool. But I want to know how these mountains were formed. It's amazing. There's a certain amount of uncertainty, of course, but incredible what people have figured out. There used to be an inland sea around here hundreds of millions of years ago. They're pretty confident in that. And so what that did was it caused deposition. So think about a big shallow sea, and a lot of living creatures are in there are going to die off, and the remains start to subside to the bottom. But also, just the bottom of the sea is going to have mud, especially towards the very shallow parts of the ends of the sea. It's going to accumulate a lot of dirt and mud. And so over a long period of time under a sea, it's going to start building up some sediment, right? Okay, so you got that. So that's going to build up, and once the water's gone, it's going to harden, and you got sedimentary rocks. So that got a lot of that around here. You've got limestone, which is a lot of old living organisms in it, and we got shale. That's an old mud and whatnot. So think about that sedimentary rock deposition is in place. Now, how do these mountains actually get forced up, though? That's because of a collision of 2 continental plates. Now, for the longest time, they thought it was accretion from west of the Pacific coastline. A bunch of pieces of land were coming in, colliding with the continental plate and forcing mountains to be built up. And there probably was some of that. But more recently, at the University of Alberta, they said the Canadian Rockies probably were formed because of an ocean basin in between these 2 continental plates. Oceanic plate is more dense, and they think there's evidence that it came down. As that oceanic plate went down, the continental plates came together, especially the one east, the ocean. They think that really was dragged westward, and boom, collision between these continental plates, and now you've got mountain building. This was like 100 million years ago. And think about a long period of time after that of erosion. Erosion has played a big part in how these mountains have formed, especially because of glaciers. We have a lot of glaciers up here. You think about big glaciers moving around, they start carving away. mountains and start forming some deep valleys, some cool jagged peaks. Yeah, a ton of glaciers have worked their magic around here. And that's one of the reasons why the Canadian Rockies are more jagged than the American Rockies. Sometimes people ask that. They seem more pointy up here. That's because it's colder up here, more glaciers, more carving, and digging in valleys and whatnot. So there you go. That's the basic idea of the geology around here. All right, folks, that concludes my show here at Banff National Park in the province of Alberta, country of Canada, continent of North America, planet Earth. All right. What a magical place this is. You got to come here sometime, that's for sure. I loved it. I mean, it's just like super paradise. Just incredible place. The mountains are awesome. Super interesting to learn about the geology of them. Interesting history here. The water is unique and special and beautiful. Yeah, lakes and mountains and rivers and garden and town and the energy of the people just having a good old time, just feeling the vibe of what a magical place. So Banff National Park, come on up here sometime, that's for sure.